Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Pakistan have signed a new defense pact with language that sounds strikingly familiar. An armed attack against one will be considered an attack against all three. It brings together three very different kinds of power: Saudi Arabia's economic and political weight, Turkey's military strength and defense industry, and, of course, the nuclear-armed Pakistan. The agreement is officially described as defensive, but comes at an extraordinary moment, with Saudi Arabia warning of possible new attacks from Iranian-backed forces. There are also growing questions about the future of the American security umbrella over the Gulf. Well, joining me now is Dania Thafer, Executive Director of the Gulf International Forum in Washington. She specializes in Gulf security and U.S. Gulf relations and teaches at Georgetown University. Dania, it's good to have you with us. What did these three countries, what did they actually promise each other today?
Thank you for having me. Well, they still have not publicly published the terms of this agreement, but there has been public statements that an attack on one is an attack on all three. And that really makes it quite an interesting and distinctive agreement if that's the premise moving forward, because it turns it into an Article 5 NATO-like agreement. And the timing is actually quite interesting. It is at a time where Saudi Arabia is getting attacked from more than one front, from Iraq, from the Yemeni Houthis, and in regards to ships and from a maritime security perspective. So therefore, it's very interesting that Saudi has signed this deal at this time, and also the fact that that this ongoing Iran war has been causing insecurity for the Gulf states.
I'm wondering, is this a genuine military guarantee, or is it deliberately ambiguous and designed to be more of a deterrent?
I think it's more of a deterrent, because if you look at the parties in this agreement, you have Saudi Arabia, of course, which is in the middle of this conflict, but you also have Turkey and Pakistan, who both are sharing borders with Iran, both have relations with Iran, and both have relations with the US. So I think in a way it's an extra layer of deterrence, if you will, for Saudi Arabia. But there are other reasons as well beyond just deterrence. It's also, there's a pragmatic component of it. For example, the military industrial base in Turkey has significant drone technology that is very important for the Gulf states in terms of countering Iranian drone attacks throughout the region. And you have, as you all mentioned, that Pakistan is a nuclear power, which could be a deterrence indirectly speaking. And more than that, Pakistan is also a mediator for this war. And so I think it's quite interesting how Saudi Arabia chose both Pakistan and Turkey, who are Western aligned regional powerhouses.
And I'm wondering, is Iran the immediate reason for this defense pact, or is Israel also part of the calculation?
I think it's an elastic defense pact designed to respond to an increased regional environment where threats are on the rise from the perspective of Saudi Arabia, and there needs to be a layered deterrent approach. If you look at Saudi Arabia's strategy, you see that they have the Red Sea coalition, the impending nuclear deal with the US, and now this security pact. So I think Saudi Arabia is looking at a layered deterrence approach to regional threats as they emerge, and also to hedge against what could be viewed from the region as an unreliable US. So I think there are many factors. Israel is a part of the equation because obviously Saudi Arabia is not going to be joining the Abraham Accords. Iranian threats is part of the equation. It raises the cost for attacks on Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, let me ask you, we've got about a minute left. I know you've written about Gulf states questioning the reliability of the American security umbrella. Is this new pact, is it a vote of no confidence in Washington?
I think it is an indirect signal of no confidence in Washington, but it's not a rupture from Washington. And as I mentioned when we were discussing that, Turkey and Pakistan are both have good relations with Washington and specifically the Trump administration. So I don't think it's a signal of a rupture, but it's a signal that we are going to find regional security arrangements from the Saudi perspective. And actually, the U.S. has been pushing the Gulf states to have more regional security independence while also buying U.S. technology. So I'm not sure if this is necessarily completely counter against the U.S. It's definitely a hedge.
Yeah, we'll be watching this. It'll be interesting, too, to see how Turkey behaves in all of this, with Turkey being a member of NATO as well. Fascinating. Dania Thafer, we appreciate your time and your analysis tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Let's take a closer look at this with Dr. Kamran Bokhari, who is a senior resident fellow at the Middle East Policy Council and a senior director at the New Lines Institute for Strategy and Policy in Washington, D.C. Welcome to DW. What prompted this deal?
Thank you for having me. So this deal has been in the making for a long time. It's something that is driven from the new U.S. geostrategy based on the doctrine of burden sharing and burden shifting. Essentially, the United States is asking partners and allied nations across the world in their respective regions to shoulder the responsibility of security. So this is a direct response to that. This, as I said, has been in the making for a while. First, we saw that last year, the Pakistani and the Saudi Strategic Mutual Defense Agreement. And it's only natural that this would have to be extended to Turkey because these are the Turkey and Saudi Arabia are the two major players in the region. But the Saudis are not a military power, so they brought along the Pakistanis. And then I suspect that there'll be others that'll be part of this. If I had to bet, I'd say Egypt would be the next member of this group.
OK, that's very interesting. So long in the making, you say. So this is not necessarily a response to what Iran has been doing since America and Israel launched their attacks on it in February.
So the Iran war has just accelerated things. As I mentioned, that the bilateral agreement between Riyadh and Islamabad took place ahead of the Iran war. Obviously, it came after the 12-day war last June in 2025. But this is something that obviously has been accelerated. What used to be a theoretical construct that, in a future potential war between Israel and or the United States with Iran, that the Gulf states would be targeted. Now, that theoretical construct, that hypothetical scenario, since February 28, has come to pass. The unthinkable has happened. And so the regional states are accelerating efforts that, as I said, have been making in the making for quite some time.
This is really interesting because you say Pakistan and Saudi Arabia already had this mutual defence agreement, yet Pakistan did not provide military assistance to Saudi Arabia when Saudi Arabia was being hit by Iranian missiles. So one wonders if there's a trust issue or if Saudi Arabia just didn't require its ally to help it when it was being bombed by Iran.
So I think that, look, we have to look at the wider dynamics here. So first of all, it is the latter. It didn't require it. I don't think the Saudis and or the Pakistanis, and of course the United States, this could not have happened without the United States giving it its blessing. So I don't think they collectively considered the situation as such where you needed the Pakistanis to jump into the fray militarily. And largely because Pakistan, at the request of the United States, has been mediating between Washington and Tehran. In order for that role to be played, Pakistan could not be a party to the conference. But I have learned through sources that the Pakistanis, in their conversations with the Iranians, have essentially relayed to them, to their Iranian counterparts, that, look, we have a SMDA, we're allies of the Saudis. So do not create a situation where we're forced to jump into the fray. Right. So these conversations have been taking place, but I don't think that the pressure is at a level where they need immediate military assistance.
Talk to us about what the commitment is between these three new allies, because as far as I can see, the wording is vague. A military attack on one is an attack on all, but there is no requirement, as in NATO it has to be said, there is no requirement for there to be a military response. So what does it commit these three partners to do?
So look, we're used to sort of seeing the end product. So we know of NATO. NATO is sort of the model, and NATO has been in operation for decades, for 80 years. But when something is being put together, even if you go back to the formation of NATO, nothing was set in the early days. It took a while to figure things out. Here, you're dealing with much weaker actors. You're not dealing with the United States and its transatlantic partners. You're dealing with a region that's very volatile. There are key differences between Turkey and Saudi and Pakistan on how to move forward. Those have to be ironed out. But I think that moving forward, there will be three stages. Short term, stabilize the region diplomatically through postures, through basically announcing that we are now an alliance. Medium term, I think that the thing is to deal, how do you manage Iran, and Iran that is going to be mired in uncertainty? And long term, we're looking at a more sort of a regional order that will have global implications, because Pakistan is an ally of China. This impacts Russia as well. So this is going to, if you sort of over multiple time horizons, we're looking at different stages of the evolution of this relationship.
I'm intrigued by how these now allies have overcome previous differences, because you mentioned differences. This is differences in application of where we are now. But previously, we've seen relations between Saudi Arabia and Turkey explode when the US-based Saudi journalist Mr. Khashoggi was murdered in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. So are those two countries now friendly, or do they just need each other?
So, to quote the former British statesman, Lord Palmerston, there are no permanent friends and permanent enemies. The only thing that's permanent are interests. So I think that applies to this case as well, to every case, actually. And I think that are all differences sorted out? No. I mean, there are many differences. What is the future of Syria? How do you deal with Iran? How do you deal with Israel? How do you deal with the Palestinian issue? And of course, the Saudis and the Turks, neither of them have forgotten that Turkey was the imperial power in this region prior to the end of World War I. And so all that history is not forgotten, but you have new circumstances. The United States is withdrawing or retrenching, reducing its security and financial exposure to the region and the broader world. So in this new reality, what do? You have Iran to deal with, so it's best to work with Turkey, but you don't want to work with Turkey alone, so you bring the Pakistanis along.
All right, fascinating 3D international chess. Thanks for guiding us through that. Dr. Kamran Bokhari from the Middle East Policy Council.